Hello, on behalf of the Reviews magazine and the Department of English and American Studies at the Faculty of Arts of Masaryk University, I would like to invite you to another interview. This time we had the great pleasure to talk to Her Excellency Barbara C. Richardson, the Ambassador of Canada to the Czech Republic.
Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. I'm very glad that you came here.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here and speaking to you in Brno.
Thank you. So my first question, this year we celebrate 75 years of diplomatic relations between our two countries, and Canada also hosts the second largest Czech expat community. What do you think, or where do you feel are the crucial milestones in the Czech Canadian relations?
Well, we actually have quite a lengthy relationship between our two countries, which I'm happy to say. I was surprised to discover that in the 1880s, the first Czechs came to Canada. We are a country of immigration, as you likely know. So that began the movement of Czechs to Canada. And then there were several waves of Czechs coming from Canada in the 1940s, around 56, and then again in 1968. And then after the Velvet Revolution in '89, then we were able to open more extensively our relationships and broaden them. So it was not just a situation of us sheltering political dissidents, but it was also a very important and growing program related to trade, related to our diplomatic relationships, related to our multilateral relationships, because the Czech Republic is an important partner for us in that forum as well. So it's allowed us to have a full and very broad relationship. And Canada, as you may know, celebrated 150 years anniversary this year since Confederation. The Czech Republic will be celebrating 100 years since the beginning of former Czechoslovakia. And it's just a really nice moment for me to be the ambassador here.
So nice to hear. And now I would like to talk a bit more about you. It's quite customary that each individual ambassadors, they have a topic on their agenda that they might feel strongly about or that they are more passionate about. So is there any such topic that you would like to pursue more in depth?
Well, of course, one of the topics which is important for me, as well as all of the Canadian ambassadors in Europe, is our new Comprehensive Canadian-Europe trade agreement, which CETA, as it's referred to. So trade is something that's obviously very important to me in my time here. I'd love to see us be able to demonstrate the advantages of that agreement. And personally, I'm interested in women's issues. I'm interested in issues that we were just briefly chatting about before we started talking on camera, related to the advancement of women into more senior positions and positions of influence and power. And we are also focused on issues around immigration and diversity, because we feel Canada has some experience in this area. As I mentioned, we're a country of immigration. So we have a lot of expertise, and I hope that we can help other countries to perhaps share some of our lessons learned related to that aspect.
Okay, returning to the topic of Canada, and you actually briefly touched upon that. This year is quite special, as you celebrated 150 years of the Confederation. Do you think that some of the events that were held in Canada have helped boost its public image worldwide? And is there still something we can look forward to here in the Czech Republic?
Well, I think by virtue of the fact that we have a very popular, very well-known and very charismatic Prime Minister, our profile has probably grown on the world stage related to that. And I believe also related to some of the policies that we have been speaking about and Canada's position related to some of the important issues for the global community as a whole. But we had enormous number of activities in Canada throughout the course of the year and until the end of this year. And here in the Czech Republic, we've also had a number of very special and wonderful events. We've had cultural events. We have the Toronto Symphony here playing with the orchestra in a special event recognizing the conductor of the Canadian Symphony Orchestra, who came from the Czech Republic. We've had a special event here at Masaryk University with the academic world, the Canadianists, and I find that I'm very proud of that there are academics around the world that are interested in Canada and make it their specialization. So I'm here to talk to them today. We have a Canada Days event that's coming up in Prague soon, and a number of events. We're bringing in, the focus there is on our Indigenous people. We're bringing in an Inuit musician and Inuit artist. We have a feature on Leonard Cohen, of course, our famous singer that many people around the world know, who passed away sadly. And then we have in Moravia, we have another Canadian Days coming up in November. So a lot of events. And just last week, I hosted in my home Margaret Atwood, who is a beloved and famous Canadian author that you may know, and she was here to receive the Frank Kafka Literary Prize. So we were extremely proud of that.
There's actually one more thing that both Canada and us have very much in common, and that is ice hockey. Moreover, Jaromír Jágr, he just signed with the Calgary Flames.
He did.
So, and there's even an official term, hockey diplomacy. So do you think, or do you believe that sport relationships can actually help with diplomacy somehow?
No question, no question. And you're in international relations, you may have studied about ping pong diplomacy, as it was called, with Richard Nixon in China. So yes, hockey diplomacy is something real. It's something that makes us feel as though we have relationships before we've even met. It's a shared passion. There's no question Canadians are passionate about hockey, but I've discovered so are Czechs. And I'll share something that I heard Jágr say after he was signed by the Flames in Calgary, which happens to be my hometown. So I'm delighted to have heard that. And I actually tweeted when he was in his period of negotiations to all the Canadian teams, please could you sign Jaromír Jágr? So I was really happy that he was signed by a Canadian. But he said this, he said in the US, 8,000 people come for a fun time and to watch hockey. In Canada, 15,000 hockey experts come to the games.
Wow.
And they criticize everything about every team. So you're either a hero or you're not in Canada, but he will have a wonderful time because he will be embraced by Calgary and he will find that everybody he meets anywhere is a hockey expert.
Okay. Also, for the past several months, the US has been rather isolationist in its foreign policy conduct. And among other things, the TTIP negotiations have been suspended. On the other hand, as you already mentioned, the provisional application of CETA has just been approved. So do you think it can bring Canada a bit closer to the European continent, which until recently, it was a position predominantly held by the US for the past several decades?
Well, I hope so. We have a natural relationship with Europe. Many of our ancestors, in fact, most of our ancestors came from Europe. Mine did, and almost everyone I know did. We share values. We share a view of the world. And with CETA, what we, both on the Canadian side and on, for example, the Czech side, our governments recognize that it's extremely important that we demonstrate to the citizens the importance of these types of trade agreements and why they can work and the difference that they can make for the people of each of our countries. Because we're extremely proud of that agreement because it's not a traditional trade agreement. It also recognizes, as you know, the issues important to citizens and protecting their social rights, their cultural rights, their control over their own issues and regulatory frameworks. So it's we're extremely proud that it's much broader than the old traditional trade agreements, and we want to prove that to both our people, and through that I think we'll develop a lot more ties.
Looking forward to that.
So am I.
And again, we are going to go back to one of the topics you already mentioned, because Canada is also one of the world leaders in promoting gender equality and women's rights. You currently have a female Governor General.
We do.
She is the fourth woman to hold the post.
Yes.
And furthermore, Canada's offices abroad are actually taking action to empower women as well. But do you feel that you still might be perceived differently within your line of work than men in the same position? And is it still more difficult to get heard in the diplomatic circle as a woman, even though roughly half of the Foreign Service members of Canada are currently women?
Well, in my career, it's been very extraordinary changes. When I started in the Foreign Service, there were very few women in senior manager positions. I would say it was rare. In fact, that's how few there were. And the same with female diplomats, female ambassadors. So at the early days of my career, I was not aspiring to a position as ambassador because it never occurred to me that that might be possible. There weren't role models, or they were extremely limited. Today, as you may know, our Prime Minister has made it one of his priorities to increase gender parity across government, and the Foreign Service is one of those. And this year, as well as last year, at least 50% of our appointed ambassadors are women. And I think that's where change really comes from, is leadership from the top. There can be a will to make changes, there can be an interest in improving the opportunities for women, but it often takes the person in a position of power to make it happen. Until the last decade, the people in positions of power were men, and they often didn't think of this. Now that more women are in positions of power, I hope there'll be a sort of organic change. But when there isn't, then you need somebody like our Prime Minister who has said, I will make that happen. And your readers and viewers might be familiar with the sort of famous moment when he was asked on the steps of Brno Hall, which is where our Governor General is, when he introduced his cabinet, why do you have 50% of your cabinet as women this time for the first time? And his answer was, because it's 2016.
I remember that. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think that says it all. We shouldn't have to explain or defend or rationalize anymore why more than 50% of our population shouldn't be equally represented
yes.
in all industry. But it's certainly changing, and women like you who are interested in international relations are going to continue to make a difference.
And my very last question, to finish on a less serious note, how do you enjoy studying Czech?
Well, enjoy, I would say, is not the word. It's a very, very challenging language. And I found it extremely frustrating because I had an assumption that I would be able to learn Czech, not easily, but that I would be able to learn Czech. And as I've discovered, it is going to be a lifelong endeavor. And it's something that is probably a special aspect of the Czech Republic and Czech people, the fact that they can speak it, so few of the rest of us can. But we try, and our Canadian officers take training in Canada before they come out, as I do, and we're continuing with private lessons. And what I've really been happy about here is, even if we try a little bit to speak Czech, the Czech people are very understanding, and they welcome our efforts, and then they switch to English because I think it's painful for them to talk to us in Czech.
Thank you so very much. It's been an honor.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.